He can talk about and articulate this stuff for hours. Welcome to this week's edition of City Current. Today my special guest is Police Chief Tarik Khatib. Chief Khatib, good morning.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Or good day, I should say, since who knows when it's going to be. We're filming this in the morning, so Mondays, just in case anybody's curious. So let's talk a little bit about, we've got a study session coming up, and let's talk a little bit about what's on the agenda for that, specific to discussions of a new police facility. We had the failed vote last November, but the need hasn't gone away.
Well, as you know, we've got a study session tonight, thanks to you and the other commissioners for scheduling that. I think the community is still very interested in addressing the need, and this begins the process of re-examining some of the information that's been out there over the last 5 to 10 years in reference to the needs of the facility.
So talk about that information that's been out there, because there's been a lot of studies done, there's been a lot of data that's been gathered. You know, we've studied studies and studied other studies, and we've gotten more and more data. And talk about what some of that information says.
Well, I think we're down to we're studying the study sessions, so to speak. A lot of the data says that we're a department that's growing, and that the current facilities that we have are not sufficient for current needs or future needs. We're just plumb out of space. The space we do have is not laid out efficiently or correctly for law enforcement uses. A lot of the facilities have structural security, safety issues that are not conducive to the best, most efficient, productive law enforcement, not only for the officers, but also for the community coming and visiting us at those stations.
So talk about the layout, and because I think when people, you know, hear the word efficiencies, right, it's just like, we'll put a security system in, yeah, you know, we'll you know, make it more efficient, lay it out differently. But that would take some major millions of dollars worth of structural renovations. So talk about how important layout is and flow is to the officers and their ability to do their jobs and keep the public safe.
Well, I think it's a two-pronged process. One, I want to start with space. We just don't have enough space. We're deficient by 50%. We don't have enough lockers to give to people. We don't have enough meeting rooms, training rooms, places where we can put equipment and personnel. So the first big red flag for me is just space deficient. Don't have enough room. We've outgrown the various places we have, and we need to have a plan. And we've been outgrowing those places for multiple years. That's why we have 5 different places. Every single time that we've needed more room, one of the kids has moved out, so to speak, and we rented an apartment. And really, we need to get the family back under one roof. So that's one thing that sometimes people forget. It's not just about efficiencies, but that's one of the bullet points. Mm-hmm. The second point is inefficiency. We've never really had a properly designed law enforcement building. So the ITC is an office building. So when we talk about efficiencies there, we talk about not having patrol and detectives together, and the lost communication and informal discussions that we can have. We have crime analysts downtown, but really crime analysts needs to also support detectives and some of the people doing the investigations. So there's a disconnect there. You know, the chief of police office is at the ITC, so I'm limited in the amount of time that I spend down at the LEC because all the room down there is taking up. So command staff doesn't visit with officers as much as we should. If you're a victim and you come visit us, there's no private meeting areas. Oftentimes you're in the lobby. A lot of times I come into the ITC, I walk through the lobby, and there's a family playing on the floor with coloring books waiting for their child to be interviewed, or other people in their family to finish their interaction with law enforcement. We have grieving families hanging out in the lobby. There really isn't a place to put folks.
And in other communities, these are things that if you walked into their police facilities, there would be these types of things for you know, victims and grieving families, and you know, people being together and having conversations and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as bad as I think our facility needs are, I'm sure there's communities that are worse off. But a lot of communities have tried to tackle the issue and are building better facilities to try to address those things. Yes.
So living in a society, you know, one of the things that I think some folks have concerns about is kind of just in general, and unfortunately as being a part of the national conversation about policing right now, you know, of course, I've seen things on social media. I know you have too, and read things, and I know your officers have dealt with some things in relationship to that. You know, talk me through the thinking of somebody saying, you know, well, we don't need to spend any more money on police because, well, they're going to be militarized,
right.
and you know, so from the police chief's perspective, I mean, I know that our police department's not like that. You definitely know that our police department's not like that, but speak to that perception a little bit.
Well, the perception of police in the nation is the same as the perception of any profession, that you have a particular issue going on in the media. So whether it's police officers or a doctor does something or the pilots crash the plane, there's always greater scrutiny on that profession, and that's good to re-examine how it is in our community. But what the public needs to know is we have a very good police department. Doesn't mean we don't need to improve in some areas. That's the point. We always improve, and one of our goals is not to be satisfied with the status quo. And things happening across the nation, people shouldn't jump to the conclusion that police officers in Lawrence are that way as well. I don't believe we have an issue with widespread racial profiling. I think there's some people in the community that have had an interaction with law enforcement that may give them an opinion, and I want to talk to those people. And we have started that process in which we've spoken with various different groups. We encourage people to come talk to us about their perceptions. Those are very real feelings people have sometimes when they have with police officers, whether it's racial profiling, whether it's just poor customer service, or the officer didn't walk away from that person having made them feel like their issue was important, regardless of race or any other kind of issue. Those are all very important to us, and we work very, very hard to do that. Now, the facility discussion is just part of the overall discussion. I don't necessarily think that the facility discussion should somehow wait on some of those other discussions. Those other discussions have been going on for 4 or 5 years, and we're going to continue to get better at what we do, and the facility is going to support our ability to get better to service the community, regardless of other needs.
So I know that one of the things that's been talked about is the need for more officers.
Yeah.
I mean, there've been a lot of folks who've said to me, gosh, the number of violent crimes that we've experienced has been on the rise, with the number of murders that happened last year, which of course you guys have to work and deal with, and to my knowledge have done a great job in making sure that those cases get resolved and the right people get taken into custody. And I know it's probably not an accurate jump to say that if we build a new facility, these crimes will stop happening. But one of the things that we've heard a lot of is we need more officers on the street. And why don't instead we put our money there? What would you say to folks that are asking that question?
Well, what I would say is this. Again, I want to go back to the global look. And the global look is people, equipment, facilities. Equipment is probably the easiest to take care of. And we've, thanks to you and other commissioners before you, done a great job getting there. We have dedicated sources of income, revenue, to try to get at that, and we're getting there. And over the next 2 or 3 years, we'll be able to get those things done. And this is relatively inexpensive. It's not, they're expensive things, but compared to a facility, they're inexpensive. So we're able to do that. Personnel, you have to do that over time. So even if somebody said, hey, Chief, we'd rather hire 30 people instead of build a facility, and my response is going to be, well, it's going to take 5 years to do that. The climate's changed. You have to have a plan, and if you're going to do that, you're going to need to hire 5 or 6 in addition to what you're hiring each year. And law enforcement agencies across the United States, because of some of the issues, perhaps because of the media, because of the changing landscape sometimes as far as pensions and unions and those kind of things, less people, and the next generation is not as interested. Less people are interested in law enforcement, so the number of quality applicants is reducing. So we're competitive. We're in a competition to get those people. So it's going to be very individual, city to city, community to community, who can attract the best people. So that has to be a 5-year plan or a 6-year plan to add.
So we can't just go out and say, let's hire $25 million, hire more police officers. You wouldn't be able to do that in a year.
No. And assuming I could, I have no place to put them. And when you look at, and even if you did have a hiring plan over 5 or 6 years, again, that's a manageable, increasing revenue each year. The facility, I think the reason why it's so difficult is because it's a big number. And it's one of those things that if you do right, hopefully you won't have to do again. and you can't. It's very difficult to piecemeal it. It's about $25 to $30 million, and you have to find a way to do it. And if you do it right, then the community won't have to really spend that amount of money on police facilities ever again. You could expand, you could do phases later on, 20, 30, 40 years from now, when you needed that additional people.
So another thing that we've heard is talking about this idea of neighborhood policing and precincts. And, you know, Lawrence may not be the appropriate size for precincts to happen, but well, before we go to that, so one of the things that we've talked a lot about is community expectations, and just it's not just that, and the survey once again highlighted it this year. It's not just that we want to have somebody that shows up when we call 911, but there are a lot of things on the fringe that our officers are expected to do. Right. Not suggested to do, expected to do, right, from a community perspective. One of those being, you know, parades and bike races and funeral processions. I mean, those are things that if you go to other communities, you're either going to charge for that service or be paid have to pay a fee, or it just doesn't happen. Or if, you know, somebody shows up at your house and you have a property crime, you call a phone number. Well, talk about those community expectations and how those really go to shape how the officer's time is structured and how you have to manage all of that.
The best way I can give you, Mr. Mayor, an example of that is to tell you a story. And there was a story of an elderly lady that was going to her bridge meeting, and her window was all of a sudden shattered as she was driving down the street. And she gets to the bridge club, and she calls the police. And she thought maybe a crime had occurred, or maybe a mower had thrown a rock through there. And the officer spent 2.5 hours. She stayed at her bridge game. The officer tracked down the mower or the person mowing that threw the rock, got a hold of that person's information, put them in touch with the lady so they could work out how to take care of that.
True story.
True story. Or stories of animal control officers feeding the dogs and watering them like you're familiar with, or stories, the pipes are frozen, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't know who to call. The only service really that's 24/7 actually driving around is going to be the police department. Calling police department, the officer who's handy with the home, opening the cabinet doors, letting some of the heat come through there. So these are extra things that the officers, this isn't above and beyond just a normal police service. That's what our community expects. That's what I want our officers to do. Why? Because those things build a relationship between the officer and the citizen. I'm there not because you're a victim, not because I'm interviewing you because of a suspect, and no, I'm not writing you a ticket on the side of the road. Those are sometimes perceived as negative, even though it's a necessary part of our job. But if I'm there to help you with your life, help you with your issue, no matter what it is, if we're the, you know, information people that you call, how do I deal with this crisis, whether it's a police or other thing, that's good. That's what we are utilized for a lot of times in the community, or a pothole, or a power line down. All those things officers do above and beyond what people think of as far as the crime or the accident. And it's those kind of stories over time that really define our relationship with the police department. And we've been doing that for many, many years. That's what we instill in our officers, is not necessarily to be crime problem solvers, but just to be problem solvers, help people solve whatever issue they have, get them to the right resource. And I think that will instill a great relationship between the police department and the community, and will continue to foster that.
So as a part of those kind of community expectation conversations, one of the things that we've heard folks ask about is this idea of precincts, and having, you know, because our expectations are different. You know that if you live in Chicago or Brooklyn and you call 911 and say my pipes are busted, they're going to tell you to call a plumber. Or if you say that a lawnmower threw a rock through your window and you want to know who it is, they're probably going to laugh you off the phone, or they may take a report that they may or may not ever read. But you know, there's been this idea of kind of Lawrence is neighborhood centric. of having different, kind of neighborhood stations where people can go to if they have an issue. How would you address that?
If my take on community policing is not about where you have your station, and it's not about having a pre-selected, those are the community policing officers over there. A lot of departments go, we have 17 or 20 community policing officers, they're in that division, they're responsible for that relationship. Community policing takes place between the individual officer and the community as they patrol around. So it's all those examples I just gave you, community policing. The fact that I go work on your case, follow up with you, tell you how I'm doing, ask you if you have additional information. Has something changed since you filed that report on the missing property? Have you found anything else missing since you came home and reported the burglary? That's community policing. Our officers being involved in a lot of the community organizations and having fundraisers for underprivileged kids and delivering presents during Christmas. That's community policing. So the community policing takes place at the officer level in the car driving around, and also at the officer level when they're not working off duty. Do they see themselves as members of the community and volunteer and other things? It's not just a job. You don't just come, punch a clock, put your uniform on, go do your job, and then you're done. That's community policing. So I don't know, having, some places they put a station maybe in a high crime area or something, and I think that makes people feel good, and they call that community policing. That's not community policing. The decision to put a police station or have satellites should be about, does that make sense for that particular community, not about a feeling of, makes us believe that it's community policing. I just don't think Lawrence, from my opinion, is needing that right now. We've tried doing some satellites before. Problem is, if I had satellite buildings, you'd show up and there'd be nobody in there. You'd be yanking on a door with nobody in there. Why? Because the sign would say, officer's out doing his job or her job. The officers are going to spend time out on the street, driving around, responding in their calls. Those little cars are like their community policing station. We put thousands of dollars worth of equipment in there. They can park them in neighborhoods, get out, walk around. They can park them at the schools, get out and walk around. What we really need to do is just bring all our resources that we have now under one roof to maximize the efficiency. In 20 or 30 years, perhaps we can re-examine the need. If this town geographically gets so large that we need precincts. But then you're talking about replicating parts of the department. You need 2 detective divisions, 2 patrol divisions, 2 deputy chiefs, 2 training areas, so that each one of those departments becomes responsible for a geographic area. That's why places like Chicago, New York, and bigger towns have those things. I think that's going to have a much bigger price tag. If somebody said, let's do precincts now, the cost is going to be more than the cost of one building. It's going to be 2 buildings, and it's going to be a lot more additional personnel right now to properly staff them.
Because you still have to have chain of command structures and all the various things, patrol officer, a sergeant, a detective. I mean, all of those things would need to be existing at the precinct.
Absolutely. You'd have to have a commander for the east side of town, a commander for the west side of town, detectives, supervisors, additional detectives, to be able to manage that, additional crime analyst, personnel, additional front office, and records people. So depending on which place a citizen showed up, if I live in East Lawrence and I come down to the station and I want my records versus if I live in West Lawrence and I want my records, where's all that? You can keep that electronically, but you hit print and hand it to somebody someplace. You got to have a front office clerk or reception, places that you have people. Doesn't address the municipal court need. Where do you put that at?
So it's not just as simple as having 2 buildings.
No, it is not as simple as having 2 buildings.
So there's been a lot of conversation because of things that have happened about, and there was some discussion at the state level about body cams, and just the how they increase transparency and accountability and that sort of thing. Talk about what we do now as far as videos and how those are reviewed and investigations conducted. And then talk a little bit about body cams and obviously it's dependent upon our ability to fund them in a tight budget
That's
year.
your part.
That's right. That's the part where we could say, well, we could do it, but it's going to mean a tax increase, which I think would turn everybody off.
Right.
But talk a little bit about the accountability mechanisms that we have in place, our internal affairs department and kind of what they do, and then talk a little bit about body cams.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of video and audio recording as it is right now. Both of our stations have audio-video recording capability in the interview rooms. That being said, they're not set up as best as possible. If we had dedicated interview rooms with the right acoustics, we do have in-car video in the vehicles with audio recording as well. That was a challenge for a while. That's part of the equipment conversation we had before. Some of those things were failing, and we had to buy new ones, and we've identified some replacement money now, so we can keep that going. Officers also have stick recorders or small audio recorders that they could take with them if they needed to record a conversation. From a prosecutorial point of view, all that information is available. So I'm a big fan of audio, video recording, as many conversations and activities that police officers have, with an asterisk. And the asterisk is, as long as we are provided the right resources to be able to utilize that equipment and to replace it and to present it to court. Lots of times people come up with a great idea, well, let's add so many dollars worth of equipment for recording, but then nobody really wants to pay the yearly maintenance of switching those out, the personnel to review those things. So we do a pretty good job doing that. That's all available for the court process. And the reason I'm a big fan of it is really it's best evidence. It doesn't tell you the whole story, but anytime the police do something, what you're really trying to do is, what is the best evidence we can get? And the more pieces of information I have to examine to determine what happened, the better. Whether we're talking about a criminal prosecution or whether we're talking about a complaint on an officer, having that information available. Doesn't mean it's going to tell you the end all of the story, but it gives you more pieces of it to make a better decision. And I think we do a pretty good job with that. So if we have an IA complaint, we can look at the car stop video. We can look at other video that we have. Body cameras is the next level of that. And I've nowhere said that I don't want body cameras. What I've said is, if we're going to do body cameras, let's do it right. I wrote a memo, and it's posted out there with an examination of body cams. There's a lot of things to consider. There's cost, there's technology. Right now, the technology is a lot like the first VCR. If everybody remembers, you went out and bought the $800 VCR. So if you jump in right now and you buy them, you're stuck to that system for 3 to 4 years. You're not going to be able to turn around. There's some departments where they need a revolution. It's so bad that you have to have body cameras, and it might be worth doing that. I go back to, we have a great department, and for the most part, our interactions are really good with the community. So we've got time to explore the body camera issue, wait for the technology to be vetted a little bit, figure out, is it going to be, Blu-ray or HD? Remember that? There's a lot of technology that's currently evolving. For example, body cameras that sense the officer's stress and voice and then start recording. Auto on, auto off, depending on the noise level, heart rate of the officer. There's technology also that occasionally beams it back to the car. If I'm involved in something and I'm the bad guy and you're the officer, if I take your body camera when I leave, I've lost the evidence. There's new technology now that occasionally uploads all that stuff. So even if you pull the tape out of the VCR, so to speak, while you're committing the robbery, the police department and the public still is able to see that. I think we really want to vet that kind of stuff before we decide, hey, let's just go out and buy $200,000 worth of body cams. I think you need people to review the information. You need storage systems. And you need to wait and see what happens with the state. There's some state legislation that's pretty specific about articulating to departments, this is the kind of thing you need to have as far as body cams. So I don't know that we want to buy this system or that system until they figure that out.
So it's not just as simple, again, as kind of a common theme today is it's not formulaic. There's a lot of factors that go into the body camera conversation, because what I just heard you say was we can go out and do it and kind of make that initial investment that may make people go, okay, well, we've got body cameras now. But if those just go into a reel or on a hard drive and they're never looked at and examined, and randomly, if we just saved it for a rainy day, and we don't have a lot of rain here, well, not literally we do, but figuratively in relationship to this, that at that point they're kind of rendered useless and maybe ineffective. They're good to have when you need them, right? But the point is not to have them when you need them as much as to make sure that the process of what the officers go through is transparent and accountable. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, you want a system in which you're not just waiting for the complaint. You want to be able to have adequate resources to randomly pull car stop data, and not just for profiling purposes, but if you're Officer Farmer and I'm your sergeant, and I do it as part of your review process, I go, the officer safety you used in this car stop was poor. You walked out into traffic, or your introduction was not good customer service. I mean, so there's a myriad of reasons why a system like this would be beneficial. But again, if you're not going to have that ability, then it just does become, we're going to gather this information, we're going to have terabytes of video, and it's not going to really be useful on a day-to-day basis.
So let's talk about something that you said earlier that caught my attention, and that is essentially that not as many people are interested now in police work as maybe there used to be.
Yes.
And I remember, watching movies back in the 80s and 90s where police work was very, almost glamorized. It was cool to be a cop. And now there's all the things about corrupt cops and racist cops, and it's all just and the assumption is that if one place is like that, of course, that every place is. So talk about kind of that process of where we've gone as a society of when you joined the police department, and it was kind of maybe even the community perception surrounding police officers back then versus kind of where we progressed as, I don't mean a society necessarily as in Lawrence, but maybe even on a national scale to where we're at right now.
In the interest of keeping it lighthearted, like I know you like, imagine a recruiting poster looking like this. Dear public, looking for applicants for a police officer job. Job involves incredibly long hours, different parts of the day. You probably won't get off of midnights or evenings until at least 10 years into your career. It's very, very dangerous. Any car stop or interaction with any subject out there that you stop may result in you getting maimed or killed. Your split-second decisions will be endlessly analyzed for hours and hours and weeks by not only the court system, your supervisors, the city, and the public, who may not understand completely what is going into that. There's the media portrayal of police officers is not very good anymore. There's a public perception of police officers aren't good anymore. So instead of the kids waving at you, high-fiving you like it used to be, it may be a different gesture. And oh, by the way, states across the nation are taking away the benefits for public employees, such as police officers and firefighters, as far as attacking their pension plans. Would you like to join? So it's a tough sell.
Sure.
So what you're looking for is to get at that drive and heart of people to want to serve their community. Given all that, I still want to step up to the plate, just like the military men and women, or people that go into teaching, or fire service, any kind of public service where it just seems like sometimes the personal benefits don't add up to what they're sacrificing for their community. And what you're trying to do is get to that heart of wanting to serve the public. That's getting more difficult. Today's generation is a little different. We've had a lot of discussion about the millennials. It's a great group of people, but they're looking sometimes for something else out of life. They're not coming into a job looking for a 32-year career. And we know police work builds upon, we put a huge investment in people, and year after year after year, the community spends more and more money on officers, and you don't want them to jet after 3 years. So millennials may not be looking for that 32 careers. They're looking for, well, I'm going to try this for a little while, see if I like it. Maybe I'll try this, see if I like it. Portable retirement systems will make that even more. The IRA, or making the individuals responsible for their own retirement, one of the unintended consequences is a police officer could spend 5 years here and they won't feel like they're walking away from their retirement. They can take it with them to the business world or something. So there's not that hook, so to speak, to try to keep that person. So what we're experiencing is not different than anywhere else. The Kansas Highway Patrol is down 50 positions, having a hard time hiring. So it's a nationwide issue, and there's still great recruits out there. A lot of them aren't passing background checks anymore. There's drug use. There's other questionable things that people have done in their lives. There's, you know, zany Facebook page postings. So I advise people to be careful with their social media if they want a career in law enforcement. There's a lot, you know, honesty issues. So the group of people, you know, when I started, it was 600 applicants for 3 jobs. This was in 1992. Lately, it's you know, 200 applicants for 12 jobs. So the percentage is getting tougher to deal with. And I don't know that that's going away. I'm very, very worried about the future in law enforcement, not just in Lawrence, but in the country. You also have what's coming up to be a big shift. Right now, a lot of departments are top-heavy, bottom-heavy. At some point, the top-heavy, meaning not brass, but seniority, 25 years and over, are going to be retiring out. You're going to have very young departments. You're going to be losing a lot of experience. So departments that do a really good job with recruitment, retention, pay, compensation, training, facilities, equipment, all those things are going to are going to be able to better compete with other departments to try to capture those quality applicants that are out there. So it's all intertwined as far as the changing environment and the need to make sure that what you're offering to the officers coming into the workplace today want to work for you and not somebody else.
Like, you know, facilities matter, equipment
Yes.
matters in that
All that
conversation,
matters.
pensions matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of morale, recruitment, training. We want to have the best training regiments, scenario-based training, because I can't do that with just one training room. We want to be able to have officers train like something may actually occur. So, for example, 70% of police shootings, and it's an actual statistic, nationwide happen in low light or dark conditions. Well, if you have a range out at the FOP that you're limited in the amount of times you can shoot at night because of labor concerns and a special use permit, you're not training for officers to make a decision and perceive visual cues in the way that which is going to actually happen. I mean, those are things, you know, but if you had a range, an indoor range where you could turn the lights down, you could do that. You could train more instead of the 1.5 hour trip back and forth to the range. So there's a lot of ways that a facility impacts your preparedness. If you have adequate conference rooms to manage critical events, well, when we have a large investigation and you want to have a room where you lay out all the information and be able to adequately try to find what happened or what occurred, you need that. If you have hopefully again, 60,000 KU students downtown, not KU students, but KU celebrants downtown after a national event. You want to be a national event win. You want to have rooms where you could watch that and manage that. We do a good job, but it's kind of duct tape and wire insofar as how we set cameras up in the rooms. We do that. We're not really set up to just walk in a room, flip the lights on, you know, where the computer's up and manage those kind of situations. So that's where there's a lot of lost efficiency. We have to spend 2 weeks putting the cameras up, doing this kind of stuff, whether that's for that kind of event or a major case. So that's where facilities can support the operations of a police department to make us more efficient.
So when you say efficiencies, that, you know, there's a cost involved with a lot of that stuff. So last thing I want to ask is, you know, let's say that folks in our community have, I just want you to be able to articulate to those that are watching. Let's say they have a positive interaction with an officer, or, you know, a detective or a sergeant or anybody, somebody at the records office, an animal control officer,
Police chief.
Police chief, yeah, or let's say they have a positive or a negative interaction. Is your door open for folks to email you and call you and stop by and visit with you? I mean, how accessible is our police? I mean, I know the answer to this question, but how accessible do you want to be to those that are watching who are thinking like, I mean.
Yeah. Oh, no, I believe I'm pretty accessible. I mean, my email's out there on the web. I've received many, many emails from people both, hey, your officers did a good job, and I've received many, many emails from, hey, I'm unsatisfied with the service, and I've responded. I'm sure I've missed one or two there. I get a lot of emails, but I attempt to respond to every single one I get, and some quite lengthy. I've gone as far as writing a 6 or 7 page email response that's taken me 4 hours to put together for just one individual asking a series of questions. And so, you know, I do go to that length because if that person's asking that question, maybe somebody else is thinking that as well. So I'm not, it's good for me to be able to articulate what it is I'm trying to say as well. People can schedule appointments with me, and I've had people schedule appointments and come in and visit with me about a myriad of issues.
All right. So, Chief Khatib, thanks for joining me today. We will see you next week for another issue of City Current. It's going to be a good one. We'll see you then.